There was a vote. There was a referendum in Crimea. The people voted to join Russia. Russia didn't put a gun to their head and make them do that. So that when you go back and start looking at the history of NATO's involvement, they always describe these are peacekeeping exercises. Really? Then why in Operation Seabreeze in like 1997, they're using anti-submarine warfare? Does that sound like peacekeeping to you? What the hell is NATO doing anti-submarine warfare in the Black Sea? Who else is there? Oh, that would be Russia. It is, the more I look at it, the angrier I get, because with the West, instead of trying to find a way to live in peace with Russia and to leave it the hell alone, they've been committed to you building up Ukraine, using it as a proxy to weaken Russia. And then I haven't even talked about the Rand report from 2019, where again they're looking at, man, we got to do something to weaken Russia. What can we do? Oh yeah, military things in Ukraine, using Ukraine as a proxy. They didn't get said that specifically in the 2019 Rand report. They had to wait for A. Wes Mitchell to put that out in a Pentagon net assessment in December of 2020. So let's dispense with the bullshit that somehow Russia is just an aggressive empire builder. Could just here the West is minding its own business, and those nasty Russians are attacking us. It's a lie, and that's what I'm documenting with this. Sorry. See, you got me all worked up. Yeah. Your president's a goddamn fool, and he's not listening to a single thing we're saying. Witkoff started his meeting with President Putin about an hour and a half ago. And true to form, Kiev attempted to launch one of their Patriot missiles or who knows what, and it went up and came down and hit a civilian apartment building. That wasn't the Russians. The Russians, they hit what they aim at. The Russians are in no mood to make, quote, compromises with Ukraine. Let me put it this way. If Putin somehow said, okay, we'll stop where we are in place, and we'll turn over Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant to the United States, Vladimir Putin would be overthrown in a coup within a month, if not sooner. He's not going to do that. The fact of the matter is, they even focus on the stupidity about, Ukraine's going to promise not to be a member of NATO. It's been a de facto member of NATO since 1995. It has been exercising with NATO. It's allowed its territory to be used by NATO. It's received intelligence from NATO. It's received military supplies from NATO. It's got NATO advisors integrated with some of its units. So let's cut out the crap and this pretense that somehow, they'll sign a piece of paper and say, we're not going to be part of NATO anymore. That means NATO doesn't get to do any more military exercises. That ain't defense. That's offense. Or let's put it this way. It can be both defensive and offensive, but that's the point. You disguise yourself as, we're just working on defense over here, and then wham, this sucker punch. So what we're looking at here from the standpoint of Russia is they want to get along with the United States. They recognize the cost of having a nuclear war, but there's no negotiating with Ukraine. Ukraine, with the current leadership, is not going to negotiate. They're not going to act in good faith at all. And that's what I said. I think Trump's delusional that he thinks he's going to get a deal. Witkoff is meeting with Putin right now, and Putin will politely lay out to him what Russia's expectations are as such. Is it possible that Putin could make some concessions that would be satisfactory to Trump? That's possible. And if he does that, I don't think Putin will be around for long, because the Russian people, particularly with the murder of this general today, are enraged, and they're not going to put up with it anymore. He's the direct line of communication between Putin and Trump. And Witkoff is not, he's created some enemies for himself in the deep state. The Soviet Union has collapsed. So what does the United States do in particular, but the rest of NATO? Do they reach out to Russia and say, hey, come on, let's put all of our past differences aside. Let's work together to rebuild your society? Hell no. They didn't do that. And instead, what they do is they start cultivating a military relationship with Ukraine. And Russia was really naive. It's unbelievable. Yeltsin, and sometimes the Russians get credited with being pretty sophisticated, but by God, they got taken to the cleaners on this. And what is that? The first military sort of agreements that, hey, we're going to start working together militarily, and you're going to join the North Atlantic Council. Now, Russia was also allowed to join that, but and then they had this partnership for peace. But all of these were facades for conducting military exercises with the West. The first one got started in 94. So you had 92, 93, they're consultations, and military people are meeting together and they're planning. But the first one comes off in 94, and 95 it really starts to take off. And it's in 94, 95 that they identify this military base, Yavoriv, which is in western Ukraine, as basically, hey, this would be a great place for a NATO base, essentially. And if you recall, on March 13th, 2022, the Russians hit Yavoriv with an Iskander missile, a bunch of foreigners. So this was an attack on NATO. That's what Russia was. They were sending it loud and clear, because by 1999, the Yavoriv is up and fully operational. 1999 is the year when they really start going whole hog with these military exercises. What else happened in 1999? Oh, yeah, that's right. Poland and Romania and the Czech Republic and Slovakia all joined NATO. And despite a promise a decade earlier by the then Secretary of State, James Baker, that not 1 inch, we're not moving 1 inch east. No, we're just, Germany's going to be part of NATO, but that's it, no more. No, expanded it. Now, when we get into the 2000s, Russia was allowed to remain as an observer of some of these exercises until 2014, when that's the deal. Now, will the United States accept that? Bibi Netanyahu doesn't want to. And what worries me is the statements that Trump has made within the last 24 hours to Time magazine, where basically he said if Israel needs to attack Iran, yeah, we could probably go along. He's not shutting that down at all. And he's not doing anything he continues to issue these veiled threats to Iran. Now, I know I've said in the past, and it's true, you can't depend upon anything that Donald Trump says. It doesn't matter what comes out of his mouth. So much of it is not true, or it's hyperbole. Oh, be hell to pay. He made that hell to pay threat. Yeah, that's some of his favorite go-to lines. And yeah, the Palestinians are living in hell, but it wasn't, Trump never followed through on his threat that he made twice with respect to the Palestinians. So this, coming back to the Witkoff-Putin meeting, that I think the Iran issue is one of the things on the table, because you saw that the Sultan of Oman was in Russia this past week, meeting with Putin. The Iranian foreign minister, she was there meeting with Putin. So there's Russia's really playing a key role with respect to getting this deal done in Iran. I think, frankly, there is no deal to be had with Ukraine. If I was advising Putin, I'd just say, look, this is a dead end. The only way you're going to change the dynamics is to defeat NATO, because otherwise NATO will continue doing what it's doing. Why do you bring Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia into NATO? I mean, good God, I think I mentioned that this has roughly the same population as Brooklyn, New York. And Brooklyn, New York is bigger than the population of Latvia or Estonia. They're candidly pissant little countries, barely deserve to be called countries. And yet NATO is aligned with them. And if NATO is conducting military exercises on the border of Russia, we would not allow that in the United States. If Russia was conducting military exercises in Mexico or Canada, and we think we can go do that to Russia. That's what infuriates me. This is crazy. And Russia's been very patient. And the problem is the West mistakes that patience for weakness. I don't know how I keep trying to communicate that to my Russian friends. They mistake your patience, your forbearance for weakness. And the problem with that is they'll keep stepping over the line, and before you know it, boom, they've crossed the line that they can't come back from. The United States is not a mediator. I'm sorry to get angry and apologize for my language, but good God, we've been supplying the intelligence, we've been supplying the weapons, we've been supplying the military planning for attacks on Russia. We are part of the problem. We're the enemy. And Russia, I think, correctly notes that they've got to deal with us in order to diffuse this whole thing. They better understand it, because this notion that the United States is some sort of benign actor in this process is just utter nonsense. Delusional proposals, completely divorced from reality. Russia is winning on the ground militarily. It's steadily advancing. Maybe not advancing as fast as some in the West think they should, but all these Westerners complaining about Russia's so slow. Hey, give me the story about the great U.S. victory in Afghanistan. How did that go after 20 years? You got your ass kicked. You have no room to talk. Oh, let's talk about your great victory in Vietnam. Oh, yeah, that didn't work out so well either. There's Iraq, Syria. Come on. The United States is in no position to lecture anybody about military progress or the kinds of plans that they should be carrying out or the kind of lack of progress. Again, I can't emphasize enough this. He's got to stop pretending that he's just like some innocent observer here going, oh boy, this is bad. Yeah, he's right in the middle of it. He's the one that sent new bombs to Israel. He's the one encouraging Israel to wipe out Hamas. He's the one that sent this crazed ambassador, Mike Huckabee, to Israel to basically endorse Israel's starving, imposing malnutrition on the kibbutzim that are basically used as military outposts. Take as many civilians as possible as hostage, that would use them as leverage to get Palestinian prisoners released and to get Israel to negotiate a deal. The calculation was that Israel would deal. They miscalculated, made a really bad bet. But at this point, they're going to hang on to those hostages until there is some sort of negotiated deal, some process in exchange that they're going to insist you got to reopen the humanitarian relief. If not, the hostages will starve to death just like the Palestinians. And there have been comments by some senior Israeli officials just recently that a fellow named Avidor, said that he's learned that Donald Trump is becoming increasingly exasperated with Netanyahu and doesn't like him. But then you had Trump put out a Truth Social post sometime this past week where he said, oh, I just got off the phone with my buddy Bibi. Man, we see everything. We're united. We're all on the same page of music. So who knows? He says one thing and does another. And that unpredictability is a real problem. The only thing that would make that possible is that if Israel chooses to launch an attack on Iran and Trump foolishly agrees to go along with it and provides assistance, and Iran destroys a significant portion of the Israeli attackers and then retaliates and destroys major sites in Israel, all of a sudden Trump is embroiled now in the potential for a global war, because any retaliation at that point against Iran, they'll have to worry about the response of Russia and China. Now, I know you get a lot of experts in the United States, oh, Russia and China will never get involved. The problem is Trump doesn't have the control he thinks he has over Israel. Israel's internal divisions are sharpening. I don't know if you've had a chance to read any of the coverage that Alistair Crook and his wife have done of the Hebrew press. But the talk about a civil war in Israel is coming from very prominent individuals on both sides of the ideological spectrum there in Israel. There's really no political consensus. Israel will continue, as the United States does, in using Mahmoud Abbas, as a puppet, and he'll do everything he can. He's done everything he can to undermine Hamas, even though Hamas, they did win the popular vote among the Palestinians, and I think now would win even more votes. They've shown that they're the ones willing to fight the Israeli aggression. But, and we should not forget that Mossad for many years funded Hamas through Qatar in order to create an opposition to the Palestinian Authority and Mahmoud Abbas, just to prevent an agreement from coming into place. All that Trump could do is make it difficult for Israel to continue to fight Hamas and Hezbollah, which in my view would be a great thing. He had a chance in the first week or two of his administration to say, hey, we're done. All personnel out, all money cut off. This ends now. We're no longer, you guys want to fight, be my guest, but you're not doing it with our money and our personnel and our information. The war would have ended. Now he wants to pretend that all this stuff that's happening is the fault of Obama and Biden. Sorry. Yeah, they had a role in creating this mess, but so did he. I sent javelins. Instead of trying to broker a peace, instead of trying to get the Ukrainians to stop shelling the hell out of Russian-speaking citizens in the Donbass during the entire 4 years of your administration, you did nothing. No, I don't think that's right. I think they recognize that this is a continuation of the provocation that started with Ukraine, where the United States was backing and encouraging the attacks that culminated in this war in Russia. And so at that point, the United States will basically have lost another war in a very dramatic fashion to Iran. And this is on top of certainly not succeeding with the Houthis. We're going into our second month of that now, and they keep shooting down more Predator drones. It's going to take that coupled maybe with an economic crash where the United States will finally look around and say, we don't need Israel. Israel's too much of a problem. And Israel's going to be eating itself from within. I don't think the claims of a possibility of a civil war are exaggerated. I think it's a genuine concern because you got a real deep ideological split in Israel. We have something comparable here in the United States. It's not as severe, but in Israel, it's coming to a head. A hypersonic missile is in a sense, it is a ballistic missile. So it's traveling at a particular speed. The question is, it maneuverable? That I don't know. But I thought there had been at least a couple other occasions where they had used, the Houthis had fired what they described as a hypersonic missile. Now, I'm not sure. Again, Europe and the United States are pretty estranged right now. But again, it's on a country by country basis now. It's not Europe. It's EC, zero relationship. U.S. has had no contact, doesn't want to talk to von der Leyen, doesn't want to talk to Baerbock or Kaya Kallas. No, nothing to do with them. Trump had a great meeting with Giorgia Meloni, the Italian prime minister. Hey, we get along great with her. He'd had the meetings with Starmer and Macron, and they came and groveled in the Oval Office, but got nothing. But we're not sitting down consulting with them, saying, "Okay, guys, here's our plan. Let's coordinate this so that we're working together." No, it's what happened. The meeting was supposed to take place on Wednesday in London, and then once Zelensky shoots his mouth off about, "No, Crimea is ours. We're never giving it up," Rubio goes, "Screw it. I'm not going to that meeting. It'd be a waste of time." The same problem we faced last week when Witkoff, again, you had contradictory statements being made by Trump and by Witkoff himself. And I'm sure the meeting started off with Arakshi saying, "Mr. Witkoff, what is your position? If your position is that we have to vacate all of our nuclear program, shut down all of our nuclear plants, that we can no longer engage in any kind of enrichment of uranium, then we really have nothing to talk about here." Or were you just posturing for the general public in the United States? And I'm sure with respect to the meeting that'll take place tomorrow, same question is going to come up. We're not going to negotiate at the end of a gun. You're not going to put a gun to our head and make us sign a piece of paper. That's not going to happen. We're an independent country. The group that's reportedly carried out the attack there in Kashmir, Lashkar-e-Taiba, or it's a breakoff from Lashkar-e-Taiba. Lashkar-e-Taiba is the one that went into Mumbai, good Lord, was that now 10 years ago? And they all these people in these hotels. They went around this, it was a well-organized thing. And here you got the Pakistan. This is not some crackpot in Pakistan. This is their defense minister saying, "Yeah, man, we were doing the dirty work of the West. They were encouraging us to fund some of these groups so they could carry out these attacks." because it accomplished some political purposes for the West. I don't believe a thing anymore that comes out of the mouths of anybody in Washington, D.C. Sorry. I'm ashamed to say that as an American, but our lies are so gargantuan and so monstrous, and it has resulted in the deaths, millions of people, women, and that is on the hands of the United States. If there really is such a thing as karma, then the United States is going to have a very bad time in the future. If the karma comes home, both from the destruction of our own Native American Indian tribes onto what we've done around the world. We like to pretend that we're this great force for democracy, we're the city on the hill, but we don't live it. We talk about it, but we don't live it. It's going to be like the end of World War II. Yeah, at the end of World War II, the Soviets and the Americans and the Brits didn't step back and say, okay, hey, you Germans, man, you can select anybody you want. You got Adolf Hitler's cousin? Great. No more Nazis. Nazis, you're out. That's done, over. And that's where Putin has insisted that there's got to be this denazification. That has to take place in Ukraine, and that means you're going to have structured elections monitored perhaps by the UN, but it's not going to allow the Banderites to continue to reign in Ukraine. As long as they're there, you're going to have that threat to Russia. They're going to eliminate the threat. And again, it was driven home today with the murder of this top Russian general. Now, that didn't cripple the Russian military. They've got other generals in line that'll come up the ranks, but they're going to seek revenge on this one. There are going to be some. In fact, I think in 1994 was the first time that Ukraine got involved with NATO exercises, but they sent their troops into Poland and the Netherlands for two separate exercises. But it was from 95 on that NATO forces started coming into and conducting exercises. They even did them in Crimea before the people of Crimea said, we've had enough of this crap. We're going back to Russia. But they've been in Yavoriv. They've been all over Ukraine. And look, I spent 23 years scripting military exercises. I didn't work on the NATO exercises, but I did help script exercises for European Command, U.S. European Command, EUCOM. And EUCOM was one of the main points of contact with Ukraine. And when you script these exercises, it's like writing a Hollywood script. You got to have a villain. Who do you think the villain was in a lot of these military exercises? Come on, it's a test. Who do you think it was? Yeah, Russia. Or did make up some imaginary country, but it was still Russia. So you're conducting exercises, and what do these exercises entail? They entail such things as learning how to alert troops and issue orders that, hey, we've got a threat that we're going to have to go to deal with. So alert your units, get them organized, get them on planes or buses or trains or trucks, and let's transport them to that site. Again, I can't emphasize enough this. When you look at the millions, it may be approaching $1 billion over 30 years. The amount of money that was spent on all of these military exercises, and the express purpose of these exercises ultimately was to equip and prepare Ukraine to be a military proxy against Russia. It wasn't for defense. It was for offense. And we've seen the culmination of that when Vladimir Putin launched